welcome to everybody there, and hopefully you'll get some information from here and how we can help you achieve better things. Our farm, and you're welcome to come out to the farm, is 60 acres permanently protected. You can see where there was a road that would have gone through the farm and it had been protected. We will be the last farm in Naperville, and this sea of houses would have continued across the farm and had not been for this protection. So that's one of the things we do, is help people protect land. We do all types of conservation practices, including education, watershed planning, and we do this out of our main office there in Naperville. The 60 acres, besides being protected, has 49 acres in organic vegetable production, butterfly gardens, solar panels, wind turbines. So the farm dates back to the 1870s, but we've updated it with a lot of the new green infrastructure is what they call it. So this little milk house here has a green roof that we installed on it. And actually, the building where my office is been plunked down here. It was Lenore's, Mrs. McDonald's birth home, and it is now at the farm for you to see. So there's a lot of cool things you can see there, including rain barrels and rainwater collections. Two different types of programs for that. And why we're working with communities is, if we want the community, if we want Oswego to be nice, we have to look at working with private property owners. Look at the second bullet point there. 95% of the property in Illinois is private. So yes, the Forest Preserve has property and park districts have property, but the bulk of it is in private ownership. So in this book by Stephen Kellert, he explains that it isn't that I'm a nature guy talking to you today. We all have nature in our soul, and we will never be happy and healthy if we are segmented from which we were evolved. So I think it's a beautiful quote. And whether it's me hiking the Appalachian Trail or my son, I guided him to his first big muskie, our experiences outdoors are really what we live for. We go on vacation and we're drawn to nature. Where do we go? I just got back from Florida and swam in the Gulf of Mexico with dolphins, and I'm going to fly out to California and go in the Pacific Ocean. And we don't really think about it, but nature is really what we're about. So bringing a little piece of that nature to our own home yards is an important part that we can bring. We are animals, and kind of understanding that we have a connection with water and the plants on our planet, and we have to kind of absorb that a little bit. So we work with 8 organizations across the area to try to educate people about these nature concepts and how they can be implemented into our yards. I teach at College DuPage and do these lectures all over the place, trying to bring the education up on how important it is for us to be connected to our environment. This is hard to see, but it's dots of properties we've worked on across the region, all the way to Lake Michigan, across the Wisconsin border, and even into Michigan. We've got properties we've been working on. So yours could be the next dot on this map. Even non-residential sites. So it doesn't have to be a home. It could be a university, gardens, arboretums, you name it, hospitals. We can work with any kind of property and apply these same principles. And part of it is using sustainable practices to increase productivity and increase habitat for creatures other than human. So in this left picture, we're growing bee balm right next to the pear tree. So the bees are coming into the bee balm, and then the pear tree blooms, and the bees will be right here to pollinate the tree. This picture, we're looking at swamp milkweed growing in this ditch. That's the bridge is going over the ditch, but we can still plant in these wet spots with beautiful colored flowers that can enhance our gardens. Even the tomatoes, your peppers, your squash, all have flowers that need to be pollinated. So growing these native plants next to your garden can actually make the garden grow better. And a lot of us are not playing baseball anymore in the parks, but we're walking our dogs or our grandchildren, and having natural areas that are uh, enhanced is a beautiful thing to have. I saw a mink swim across this creek. I'm standing on a bridge here looking down the creek, and the mink came right across here. Um, so having these experiences close by, we don't get a chance to go to Yellowstone or um, these national parks that often, even the forest preserves. How often do you get there? Every year. And so having places within distance of our homes that we can walk to is a really nice thing. We're educating people about use of land. So in this park site, this low area was just a mud hole, and they kept trying to mow it. And we convinced them to take the ditch and create a habitat area. So the name for it is, we're calling it a bioswale, much better than ditch. And it's creating habitat. So the rabbit has a place to go when the mower is going by, and you could find a praying mantis or a snake, or have habitat for butterflies right in the park. And these areas are not being used for ball fields. And why not create areas and reduce the amount of mowing? So what I bring to people is simple things: water conservation and less chemicals, attracting birds and butterflies, a little less grass maybe, healthier soil, and think about the tree diversity. Where it all starts is that we are a plant-based planet. There is no life on this planet without plants. So we have to quit thinking about plants as, oh, that's a pretty thing for my yard, and think about it as functional thing. And inside the house, we wouldn't think of getting rid of our functional things, the couch that we sit on, or the microwave, or the stove, refrigerator, those things that we need to function with. Those are our core pieces in the house. When we step outside, we need to think the same thing. There are functional things that are necessary in the yard. And if we have it just full of decorative things, it's not going to function. And when this hummingbird comes around, they're looking for food, and he scans your yard very quickly and decides whether there's anything there for him or not. So if you don't have hummingbirds, part of the reason is you haven't created a place that hummingbirds would want to come to. And just like a recipe book, that you wouldn't start by making a cake by just saying, well, I'll throw some of this in there. You have a recipe, and you go by the recipe, and you put what's supposed to be in the cake, and then you'll have the right cake. The same thing goes with our landscape. If we want hummingbirds, we're going to plant certain plants that attract hummingbirds. And if we want wrens, or if we want monarch butterflies, we're going to plant the things that they want. And we increase the chance that we will attract them to our yards. So it all starts with evolution. And we understand in evolution that a giraffe has this long, goofy neck to eat the acacia leaves. We understand a turtle carries about in the shell so that it can protect itself. We understand evolution, but we don't see it in the plants. So this root chart is all we have to really get a look at how these roots are different. So if I showed you a daylily, or if I showed you a coneflower in a pot, you'd say, oh, they look similar, same thing, but they're not. And way on the left, we're going to look at this grass. Later on, we'll talk about the grass, but you can buy grass as sod, and it's rolled up. You understand it doesn't have any roots, and the roots are the functional part. So that's why we had a prairie burn today at the farm, and you can burn off this top part because it's not necessary. Last year's plant growth up here is not necessary. We can burn it off. The important parts are below ground where it's safe, and these plants, the adapted plants, will survive the heat just fine, and the ones we call weeds are not adapted. They will not survive. Look at the root system when you shake it out and wash it, how massive the roots of a prairie could be. So how do we make those prairie plants look pretty? Our eyes are looking for structure in a landscape, and I'll show you how we do that. So we've learned if you clump them, it looks a little more organized. Shorter is better than tall. Spacing them is a good thing. Decorative things in the yard. I'll show you more pictures. Sometimes we limit how many different types of weeds or plants we put in there, so it makes it easier for us to identify. Make paths so we can move around in the gardens, and use plants that can thrive in a variety of conditions. And again, I'm going to be here to help you. Jessica and I will offer to even come all the way out to your yard one by one if that's what we need to help you. There's some beautiful plants. This is lobelia. This is Joe Pye weed, prairie smoke. So when I'm trying to convince people to put these plants in, you do it with pictures showing them, even in the front yard, how attractive a native landscaping can be. And there's milkweed for the monarchs over here. And it doesn't have to be 100% native. We've got some grass, and this is a cultivar phlox in the front, but we've incorporated habitat, and we're going to be able to absorb water and attract birds and butterflies with some of these plantings. In the backyard situation, if you're sitting on your deck looking out, instead of hearing the mower run, you might find baby bunnies, praying mantis, butterflies. This coreopsis here is very attractive to finches. They'll come in and feed on the seeds of these plants. But with the rocks and logs and a familiar fence back there, stepping stones, it makes it look like an organized, nice looking yard instead of a weed mess. Part of the problem with water is when we urbanize an area, it creates bad water. So you're showing in this picture on the left, when Oswego was a farm community, or even before that, when it was prairie, it was permeable. The water would be soaked into the ground. As it becomes rural and the farming, we lose 40% of the percolation. And then suburbia, it's 70% impermeable, and it doesn't go into the ground anymore. And downtown Chicago, 99% impermeable. The worst river we have in the state of Illinois is the Chicago River. So there's a direct connection between this brown water and what blue water would be if it was more natural. So the best water we have, if you want to look at clean streams, you go to Galena, you go to Southern Illinois, or way out west in some areas where it is not built up, and you will find better water quality conditions. You're on the Fox River, you see how it runs brown or green, and that is from the materials that are washing into the river. We work with landowners. This one, when I went to their property, about 80% of the trees they had were invasive buckthorn and honeysuckle. And they set upon about a year's worth of cutting to remove them. And when I went back, they were very proud. They said, we've got every one of them cut. And this is a shagbark hickory back over here. The native plantings, when the sunlight was allowed to hit the soil again, they had trillium and bloodroot and all these beautiful woodland plants that started popping up again. And I said, well, your yard is beautiful. They get the conservation at home sign. I said, the next thing you need, Carol, is a bluebird house. And she said, Jim, I've been here 17 years, never had a bluebird. And I said, you never had a savanna. And no more than those words come out of my mouth, here comes the bluebird. It flies right in, and she accused me of having that in my car. But some of these changes we make will have effects, whether it be water quality or bringing in the right birds. The recent bird count, 50% of the birds were in these 4 species. And this English starling and the English sparrow both are considered invasive in our area. I'll talk about geese more later. This is the birds we want to see. And this grouping will stop by for a snack, but we have to understand that they cannot sustain themselves from a strictly seed or suet. Even this hummingbird down here, we give it sugar water. And that's similar to me drinking a Pepsi, where it gives me a little sugar boost, but it does not sustain me. And this hummingbird lives off of ants. So right now, there are no hummingbirds here because there are no ants available. All these birds have flown south, or majority of them. This grouping certainly are not here now. They're on their way back, but the bugs will come out of hibernation, and these birds are going to be waiting for those bugs. So if we want these birds, there's a easy prescription. Everybody puts out a wren house for this little guy, but understanding he would never come to your bird feeder. This group never will come. Strictly bugs, and they will switch to berries later in the season, but they need bugs for their babies. So then when they raise their young, it's going to be all bug feeding. The protein is highly necessary. So understanding that the bugs go on the native plants and the birds come to eat the bugs. So we want the birds. There's nobody that calls me and said, I don't have enough ants or I need some more beetles in my yard. Bugs are not the interesting thing for people, but you have to understand, to get the birds, you need the bugs. And the same thing with the monarch. He's the poster child for nature. Everybody loves the monarch, but the bees do most of the pollinating, and we build butterfly gardens, and we don't have to talk about the bees. They come along for the ride, and they're under the radar. So we will get plenty of pollinators when we focus on creating habitat for butterflies. So when I'm at schools, I talk about creating these butterfly gardens, and I don't focus on snakes. Talk to them about skunks. You could have more skunks. Nobody asks me for skunks, but they do ask me for butterflies, and it all comes together. We're talking about adding habitat that is both pretty and attractive, and it doesn't matter if it's wet or dry or sunny or shady. There's plants that are appropriate for those areas, and you just need a little help figuring out what you want to have. Downtown Lisle, and there was a patio up here, and it sloped down very quickly, and the water would wash off into this parking area. So what we did was build this rain garden, and instead of it being a grass ramp, we lowered and made a scooped out area, and we planted this rain garden with, this is swamp milkweed, this is golden Alexander. But you can see in downtown Lisle, with the train station, the police station, and all of this heavy traffic, monarchs still found it and were able to lay their eggs and successfully use that site for their migration. And plants like this Asclepias incarnata, it's the swamp milkweed, very easy to grow plant. And a lot of times people tell me that their yards, I took this picture on the right, there's people said that, oh my gosh, you have to come in the backyard, you see where it just floods all the time. When I walked back there, this is what I found. And you could tell that it flooded sometimes, but the conditions were heavy flood and nothing. And so this is compacted clay. You can see it's actually cracked like clay would be. So it's devoid of organic material. And the plant that is going to grow in here needs to be very adaptive to dry or wet. And because some areas like this are both dry and wet, it just depends on the month. So they might be wet April, May, and then June, July, August, they might be very dry. And a lot of these native plants are just used to that. That's the normal way in Chicago area, is to have swamp times and drought time. So look at how beautiful this grouping of plants, the blue lobelia and the cardinal flower. So when I'm telling people that in those areas where they think nothing will grow because it's too wet, there's a whole host of beautiful plants that we can put in. And sedges are another thing, workhorse. So you could put all sedges on some area, and there's a whole variety from shade-loving ones to full sun to tall ones to short ones to wet-loving ones. You name it, there are a variety of sedges that we can utilize in these areas that would solve problems where, you know, quote unquote, nothing will grow. So, you know, doesn't matter what your site looked like before, there would be ways to transform these sites and take ugly and make it pretty. So we want to increase the accessibility to the site. So we created a path. We want people to smell and hear and experience the pollinators that go into these areas. And so we want people in there. And the way that they're going to love it is by enjoying it and saying, what is this plant? I want to have it in my yard. So this was in the Naperville, right by City Hall. And so take this to a residential yard. These people said, well, we just moved in and we don't have any birds. We don't have any butterflies. We have a big problem with water. So here's 2 downspouts, and all the water ends up on the sidewalk over here. And in the wintertime, it's an ice skating rink. So they have to put down a bunch of salt. The salt kills the grass. And during the summertime, they get their shoes wet coming in and out of the house. It's a problem. And they don't like the way it looks. They don't like the way it functions. And they want to know what they could do with that. So first, the overgrown arborvitae on the front came down, looked at the beautiful brickwork on the house. And it isn't rocket science. The sidewalk was lower than the grass. So water's going to run down and it pools in the lowest point. This is impermeable. It can't be soaked in here. And so it's going to sit. So what we do is we lower this area over here and we give the water a place to go. Now it comes down and it goes this way to the low spot, and it waters these wet loving plants over here in the rain garden. No longer is the sidewalk wet because it's no longer lower than all of the landscaping. We got rid of a bunch of the grass in the front yard, created habitat. We made a defined edge so it looks purposefully planted. We put clumps of plants in that are recognizable. And when they start blooming, we're going to have gardens here and a pretty yard, and it will attract birds and butterflies to the front yard of this little home. In the backyard situation, little Johnny wants to have a place to play baseball or soccer. So it looks to me like this family is having chem lawn, or somebody's putting some, I don't see even one dandelion in here. The house is always built up on a hill and the ground is sloped away on purpose when they grade the property. So the water is going to go away. It's going to come across this grass carrying chemical with it. And in this case, they have a buffer on the outside that's absorbing this water. This is obedient plant and coneflowers and big blue stem. They have black-eyed Susans and coneflower over here too. So even though they're using chemical, they have found a way to absorb some of that water and utilize it to help mitigate the problems. Look at the traditional landscape. So what do you have in your yard? And all you have to do is Google, where do daylilies come from? You could add things on this list like lilacs or roses, whatever you have. And I'm not saying we can't use these. I'm saying that we have to understand that they're purely decorative. They're ornamental. And a lot of things, when you see them, you see the word ornamental, boxwood or something like that. That's saying it's not going to be functional. So in the case of lilacs, we want it, even though it's decorative, because of the beautiful smell. Or the roses have the beautiful flower. Okay. But when you look at something else, does it really, that, like grass, for example, the turf grass down here, is it really that beautiful? So if you want to see whether it's functional or decorative, all you have to do is Google it, find out where it came from. And if it came from China, Japan, Europe, it's not going to function in Illinois. If you were in Arizona, we'd be talking about cactus. So understanding that Illinois is the prairie state, and the prairies stretch from Ohio to Colorado. So we're right in the middle of the prairie areas. It's very clear what was here prior. And then show you some of those plants. So in these wet areas, we talked about the swamp milkweed before. I showed you a picture of the cardinal flower. Turtlehead is another one that's really pretty. Blue flag iris. This blazing star has a variety of species. There's one that likes it dry, one that likes it wet, one that likes it shady. Bluebells are just starting to bloom now. Beautiful coverings in the woods area. So you don't have to sacrifice beauty to get that function. And the geese. So this area, and maybe it's in your homeowners association, it's not particularly pretty. And you don't want to put a blanket down here and have a picnic with your kids. You know, it's loaded with goose poop. It's been sprayed probably. I don't see any weeds. So the chemicals are all over this. Goose poop's all over. And you have no diversity. You've got erosion of the shoreline. The water is brown. You know, what's attracting you to this site? And could I interest you in something different and something that wouldn't have problem areas? This is a creek situation, and eventually the creek is going to eat this path away up here. So how can we solve problems and make things prettier with a diversified shoreline? So instead of, the geese are gone here. So geese will not walk through these plantings. They're terrified of coyotes or fox. So geese are gone. Instead, you're going to have heron. And instead of having to mow the grass, they might burn it. But there might be frogs and a variety of different things, including hummingbirds and butterflies in these areas that you wouldn't have, you know, in these other areas. So it's, again, what do people want? And I have to sell this concept to these homeowners that looking out at this is going to be a better thing. And your kids can come out here and learn about frogs and toads and enjoy the beauty and the smell of the prairie, and you won't be looking at geese coming up on your patio. This is actually a picture I took in Oswego. I was at a lady's house, and it was a terrible drought, and yet we mow the lawn. It was creating a dust bowl there, and it's beyond me why we have this fascination where we have to mow every Tuesday, regardless of what the conditions are. It's not good for the grass. It's not good for air quality. It's not good for any other birds and butterflies or anything else that would be out there. The noise pollution, burning of gasoline, cost to the park district or to your homeowners association. When somebody's mowing it, somebody's going to pay that, and most likely it's going to be you and me. And the grass itself, I mean, what we're doing with it, we've been told by Scott's and these other fertilizer companies to feed it constantly. And this bag of fertilizer, I used to sell fertilizer. This is nitrogen. heavy, heavy nitrogen, and the grass does not want that much nitrogen. The grass is a healthy thing, would be a balanced fertilizer. This is not balanced in any way, shape, or form. And what this is going to do is grow the blade of grass overnight. And that's really not what you want. You don't want to have to mow twice a week. What you want is healthy lawn. And what you're being sold is not that. We cover the United States with grass. So the green states are ones that grass is the biggest covering in the state. So in Illinois, we have more grass than corn and soybeans together. And grass does not produce any ethanol, or it's not making broccoli for the poor. It's not doing anything beneficial for us. The states out west that don't have grass, Nebraska and Kansas are growing wheat primarily. And these are mountainous states or desert states. So, and also fairly sparsely populated, comparatively speaking. And so you can't grow grass up in the mountains, so there isn't any grass. But every place else, we've had this fascination for grass. And grass, they give they say Thomas Jefferson was the one that brought turf over, and he wanted it because it was a rich man's surface, very costly to maintain and keep looking great, but he didn't care because he was rich. And from that little piece, we now have it in every single state. Look how much it's costing us, $40 billion a year, 20 million acres of an unproductive grass that's considered biologically dead. So does that make a lot of sense? And when I show you a picture, this is in Geneva, left or right, which one's prettier? Which one's absorbing water? Which one's feeding the birds and butterflies? If you were a rabbit, where would you be? The orange we're looking at here is milkweed. So monarchs have habitat. That hummingbird is most likely going to be here, not here. The grass is burning out in a drought. It looks dead and drying, and yet this is in full bloom because it's absorbed all that water in the spring and has held the water in the root systems, and then can bloom in the middle of a drought. But what do? We have this surface across most of the United States. And I don't think that that's really what we want. If we can have something that's attractively done, well done, and looks beautiful, I'm saying that that the right side would be a legitimate option. And it doesn't have to be, whether it's full sun or shade, there are beautiful plants. We're looking at wild geranium. So most of the people, when I'm talking to them, they say, well, geranium doesn't come back. Not the one that you buy at Home Depot doesn't, but the original, the mother of them all, the wild geranium, comes back year after year. And it's a beautiful pink flower in the shade. This is Woodland Phlox, celandine poppy. There's sedges, this grass-like stuff, doesn't ever have to be mowed. And look how pretty that this is in Chicago, in one of the islands along the road. So we can apply this pretty much anywhere. And to combat the grass, I have worked with some companies to create what we're calling a pollinator meadow. And it's shorter than a prairie would be and a little more flowering. So this is what we have at the farm. Ours is 25 feet wide and 1,400 lineal feet along regional bike trail. So we don't have to mow it every week like you would grass, and we burn it once a year. We can mow it once a year or so if we wanted, and it's full of habitat and low maintenance. We sold this to the Toll Road Authority. So this is called the front slope, and I'm not interested in that. It's full of car parts and salt. But the back slope is been planted here. It's 50% less costly to maintain. The water that would have sat in this ditch is no longer there. The roots have sucked it up, so there's no mosquito habitat. This white is penstemon, very attractive to hummingbirds. And they also use this plant for heart medicine, digitalis. This plant's name is Penstemon digitalis. The digitalis heart medicine that people put underneath their tongue when they're having a heart attack comes from this plant. So it's interesting things that we can do with these plants, and stories that how they were used over the years. So how do we bring this into our yards? In this depiction, we're showing water is coming off your yard, off your house, off your driveway, and it's moving across the property. Grass is a good conveyor of water. It will move across the grass, not go down. And in this picture, we're taking the downspout water from the driveway, and we're collecting it in this garden where it's running. And if you don't think water is running in your yard, that means you haven't seen it, but it's moving. And some of you have had water problems where it puddles somewhere, and we can solve that. So now notice this picture, and then I found an actual one that was very, very similar. So the water from this house came over, and it used to come across the sidewalk and cause problems on the sidewalk. We lowered it down and created this flower bed, and now all the water stays in the flower bed. Because part of the problem is that we've been paving over everything. And once you create impervious surfaces, you can, every time they build a Walmart or stores, roads, houses, subdivisions, we cover over the permeability of that piece of land, and we reduce habitat. So now what used to be called point source pollution was when pipes would bring pollution to the river. That's all been cleaned. And so now what we're looking at is non-point source, where it is water that runs across the land picking up pollutants. So coming across your yard, coming across the road, and the land that's in these lower areas is a collector for all of this water. And the water quality, by the time it brings all that material down into the water, it is negative affecting the water in our region. So rather than say point source pollution, the easy term is to call it runoff. And statistics show that either between 1/4 and 1/2 inch of rain, it no longer can hold it in the sod, and it starts moving it horizontally across the property and dumping it into these drain heads. And part of the problem is it's called eutrophication, where the excess nutrients in our lawn, a lot of that nitrogen that I was showing that we put on our grass ends up washing into the waterways, and also includes goose poop, dog poop, other kinds of things like that, including leaves that break down and add nutrient to the water load. The nutrient causes growth of algae, so you see the green or brown water, and the algae growth is a major reason that the river is depleted of oxygen. So with no oxygen, you don't get good fish. And that's what really people are caring about. They're not caring about the little bugs in the water, but that's what the fish eat. And it's the same thing. So we understand that. And one of the easiest ways to fix it would be, it's called phytoremediation, where phyto means plant. And we can put plants in the water that will clean the water. And these plants are just doing what they do. But it's an amazing thing to clean not only water, but it'll clean air, and it also cleans soil. They're planting native plants on brown fields in Chicago to help remediate the soil. And what we're trying to get across in all the communities is to keep the water where it falls. So keep the water that falls in Oswego, keep it out of the river. If it gets in the Fox, it's going to New Orleans. And there's a dead zone at the mouth of the Mississippi at New Orleans where no shrimp, no fish, because of this oxygen depletion that happens in these areas. So as it goes downstream, it gets worse and worse. And we're certainly not at the beginning of the watersheds. So the Fox River starts all the way up in the chain of lakes in Wisconsin and comes down, and ends up dumping into the Illinois, and then the Illinois dumps into the Mississippi. So you can see how downstream the water from Oswego goes all the way to New Orleans, and people have canoed from your community to New Orleans on the direct waterways. So some of these, like the concept of a rain garden here, my boss and I are out lowering this area, and these rocks behind me here are going to be put on top of this rubber mat. We've pitched the rubber mat so that this water from the downspout will bounce off the rocks that we put there, keeping it out of the basement, and the water's going to drain over here and be absorbed by the plants. And voila. So this is Spiderwort, this blue here. This is a really cool plant. It's called prairie dropseed. It likes it dry on the outside of the rain garden here, and it actually can eat gasoline and oil. They're using it on gas stations. And we didn't plant it, but it popped up over here. This is a native yucca. So a dry loving, it's called rattlesnake master. After when the head's dry, if you bump them, they sound like a rattlesnake. Interesting things. And you can see we used, see this air conditioner unit? A viburnum bush is covering the air conditioner. Viburnums are really good for bringing birds in. They have nice berries in the winter. So we're solving problems, making it look pretty. We don't have to mow it. The water is taken care of. Win-win situations. And rain barrels are just another way. So the term rain garden or a bioswale is a garden that's utilized with wet-loving plants in their ditches and swales, and we'll help you design and implement any of these things that you want to do. And we're having a rain barrel sale to help you with that. And we've got all the pieces to help you. We've sold 14,000 rain barrels. We're the biggest distributor of rain barrels in the state of Illinois. And we've solved all the problems. They have screens on top that keep the mosquitoes out. There's overflows, extra spout areas. You can connect them together. They're food grade plastic barrels that came from around the world. And we educate people that rainwater is better for your plants. It doesn't have the chlorine, and it's got more nutrients, and it's got the minerals that the plants need. So it's much better for your garden, your pets, and we can help you with that too. So we want to introduce you to all of those things. If people say the rain barrel, you said this rain barrel is kind of ugly, decorate them. There's answers for all these things. You don't know how to hook it up, we'll help you. So that's what the Conservation at Home program is, and we take it farther than most organizations do. You can get brochures online, but who will come and help you? And we have a plant sale. So where would I get the plants? We can help you with what plants to pick and even how to get them. So I don't, I've done this job for a long time, and I don't know what more I can do than give you information and come and help you. All of the stuff that we do, we'd like you to join our program, and that's $50 if you do, but there's no requirement. So I will come and help you, and Jessica or one of us would come and help you with your yard, and there's no direct charge. You don't have to join anything. You don't have to buy anything. We're here to help you. As a not-for-profit group, we can offer these things Some people give us big donations, some don't give any, and it all works out okay. So I have included my office number and my email, and Jessica is going to send out information to you on how you can contact her or I. The same kind of information there. I have a very long email address. I'm sorry about that. But I can take your questions now that you might have. Anyone that's built up, Jessica?
Thanks, Jim. That was so interesting. Even though I've heard Jim speak several times and I'm lucky to be his coworker, I still learn things every time, and it's always interesting to listen to. And so with that, we've just had some great comments about the ditches and highways being used for pollinators, and being able to connect with HOAs and these things. So please do feel free to reach out to Jim or I. We also work with HOAs and other homeowners in addition to the municipalities like Oswego. That's what we're here for. So first question in here: how long should I wait for a home visit? My wildflower garden is still in its infancy.
I think you don't have to be done. So that's the first thing, is we help people on the journey. So even people have been doing it for years. Jessica and I have been doing it in our yard for years. There's times that I'd be embarrassed to have somebody come over and look at my yard. So you don't have to wait. April is a good time. May is a good time. The plant sales are oftentimes in May. So kind of getting a plan and understanding what my objective is for this year, what I want to try to, achieve. So I think the timing is good. We tried to time this at a point where you could get a yard visit and still have action. So you're not, this July saying, well, this season's already shot. So we get a jump on it. So I'd say anytime in April is a great time to have a yard visit.
I agree. That's a great time to see a clean slate as well, Jim, and get ideas before our plant sale coming up on May 1st and 2nd. And then I'd also just like to touch on a comment that Heather put, that she can't talk her husband into getting a rain barrel because he doesn't want to have to cut the downspout and he doesn't feel like he's handy. So I did share your YouTube video of the easy steps, but any words of encouragement or guidance you could give on that would also be helpful, Jim, for that intimidating part of having a rain barrel.
I remember a story, or I remember a situation I had. The husband and wife came to get a rain barrel, and the husband did the right thing, and he said, honey, what color rain barrel should we get? And the woman said, I don't care. I don't want a rain barrel. Some comment like that. And then she said to me, can you help me with something? And I said, okay. And she said, well, my mom died a couple of years ago, and my sisters gave me all my mom's plants, and they're dying. And I need to do something different. So what can I do to help me save my mom's plants? And I said, the first thing I would do would be to put rainwater on them. And then she sat there for a second. She said, my mom had all these buckets and pails and different things in the yard, and we didn't know what that was for, but I bet she was collecting rainwater. And she called me like a couple of weeks later after her husband had hooked up the rain barrel, and she said, oh my gosh, the plants like immediately sprung to life and they look wonderful. We need another rain barrel. So I think part of getting back to the question was, part of it is understanding something that it's going to bring you really good water for your plants and for my dog waits at the door to get to drink from the rain barrel water. So cutting some of these obstacles that we put in front of ourselves, well, wouldn't know how to cut this, or I don't know. we can solve all those problems. You're welcome to write me, call me, and I can walk the husband through how to do it. It cuts with a simple hacksaw. If you have a power tool, there's ways to do it with that, but you don't need power tools. And I show you in the video how I did it with just hand tools. So it can be very simple. And if it brings benefit, that I think is the motivation to want to do it.
I agree, Jim. And as you mentioned, that's what Jim and I are here for. We can come out and help walk you through those things, and give you some other ideas on other things you can do in your yard and work towards that conservation at home certification as well. And then I'll go ahead and put the conservation at home link in the chat as well, so you can easily find more information on that. Other than that, that's all the questions we have for tonight, unless we have anything else coming in here, which it doesn't look like we do for now. So I'd just like to thank you for that great presentation, Jim. Thank you for the great questions and interactive chat. And also, we'd really like to thank the Village of Oswego for being our great partner. They continue to be a great partner, pair with us on these rain barrel events. So in the chat, I posted the link to order your rain barrel today. Those will be available for pickup at the Village of Oswego, and that's huge this year. The shipping costs went up to almost $18.50 from what it used to be $5. So by the village hosting a pickup event, they're really helping to keep that cost down for everyone and make this accessible for their residents. It's huge. So we really encourage you to take advantage of their pickup day event and the sale provided here with our recycled content barrels, as Jim was talking about. Then
you can come out to the farm. We sell rain barrels at the farm. So if you couldn't make the pickup event, we have another pickup event in, was it Geneva or St. Charles, up in that direction, and you can come to the farm. So if you just, from Oswego, it's pretty easy. You just take Wolf Road until it turns into 95th and come right over to the farm. So set up an appointment with Jessica and I, bring your family or a group from Oswego and come over and see what we have. We can show you how to hook up the rain barrels there. We have 2 different types of setups and rainwater harvesting, all of that stuff.
Some great demonstration projects, and we just like to meet everyone that's interested in this too. Happy to have a good chat about all of these things. And one last question that came in is if we will put the YouTube link of how to connect the rain barrel to your gutters in an email, and I certainly will. I'll be able to have one of our staff who's very tech savvy with Zoom. She easily pulls off the lists of the registrants, and your information should be in there, and I'll be able to send it out to all of you afterwards, all these links that we've been mentioning here today. All right.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you so much, and everyone have a great night.